On a humid night in Cold Hollow, a forgotten 1940s radio station suddenly crackled back to life. No power, no staff, no explanation. The voices were old, the programs out of time, but the cries for help felt hauntingly real. As people begin to vanish after each broadcast, Mystery Incorporated is called in. But how do you solve a case when the past won't stay silent, and something, or someone, is still listening? The fog lay thick over Cold Hollow's sleepy Main Street, curling in ghostly tendrils around street lamps that flickered like nervous eyes. Midnight had just passed, and most of the town was tucked safely in bed, except for the few who claimed to have heard it. A voice. Crackling, broken by static, speaking from nowhere, and everywhere. It echoed from old radios, car speakers, even baby monitors. The voice of a man who died in 1946. Inside the mystery machine, the gang drove in tense silence. The only sound was the low hum of the van's engine and Scooby's nervous whimpering as he clutched a half-eaten burrito like a security blanket. "This is the weirdest case we've had in a while," Daphne said, glancing at the dark town through the window. "And that's saying something." Fred nodded, his eyes on the road. A radio station that burned down 78 years ago suddenly starts broadcasting again, and every time it does, someone disappears. Zoinks! Shaggy clutched Scooby tighter. Why do the disappearances always have to come after the creepy stuff starts happening? Velma tapped her tablet. "I've already cross-referenced the audio recordings from last night's broadcast. They match voice samples from archival interviews with WCPH radio staff from 1946. It's impossible, but they're authentic." "But ghosts don't usually follow a programming schedule," Fred muttered. "We need to see that station for ourselves." The van turned off the main road, tires crunching on gravel as they approached the ruins of WCPH radio. The building stood like a corpse in the woods, collapsed in some places, blackened with soot, yet eerily intact in others. The old tower loomed above like a skeletal finger pointing at the stars. They stepped out cautiously. An old, on-air, sign flickered to life, casting an unnatural red glow across the threshold. "Jinkies," Velma whispered. "That sign shouldn't even have power." Fred led the way with his flashlight. The lobby smelled of burned wood and mildew. Papers were scattered across the floor, some of them pristine, as if they'd just been printed yesterday. Daphne picked one up. "Fred, this press release is dated October 31st, 1946. The same day the station burned." Suddenly, a burst of static blared from an old radio resting on a charred desk. The gang jumped. Scooby yelped and leapt into Shaggy's arms. A voice came through the static, crackling like dry leaves in the wind. "This is Charles Wainwright, broadcasting live. Help us, trapped in Studio B, flames, they're not letting us leave." Silence. "W. Wainwright?" Velma gasped. That was the lead announcer in 46. "He died in the fire." "Or someone wants us to think he did," Fred said. "We need to find Studio B." The gang ventured deeper into the ruins. The hallways were warped by heat damage, some caved in entirely. Oddly, one door stood perfectly intact, freshly painted with the faded words, "Studio B." Daphne tried the handle. Locked. "This door doesn't match the rest of the building." Fred pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, they found a room that didn't belong in a 1940s station. Modern soundboards, digital equipment, and even an encrypted laptop sat beneath a dusty tarp. "This is brand new tech," Daphne said. "But why hide it in a ruined building?" Before anyone could answer, the laptop screen flickered to life. A grainy, black and white video began playing. A man in a vintage radio host uniform stared into the camera, eyes wide with panic. "If you're hearing this, the station is alive. It's feeding on memory, on fear. We couldn't stop it. You must." The video cut to static. Velma's hands trembled. This This isn't just someone pretending to be a ghost. Something bigger is happening here. Just then, the floor beneath them creaked loudly. A low hum vibrated through the building, as if the tower outside were waking up. "Ruro," Scooby whimpered, ears flattening. The on-air sign flickered again, only now it pulsed like a heartbeat. Fred raised his voice. "Let's get back to the van and call the authorities. We need backup." "No." Velma snapped. "We can't involve them yet. If this is what I think it is, anyone who listens to the broadcast becomes a target. We might be next." Daphne's phone buzzed. She looked down and went pale. "You guys. I just got a text. From my cousin Beth." Fred frowned. "What does it say?" Daphne held it up. The message read, "Turn on the radio. Studio B has a message for you." Velma turned toward the now open Studio B door. That text was sent from a phone that was reported lost last year by one of the missing townspeople. The town of Cold Hollow had never been truly quiet, but tonight, an eerie silence swept through the streets, as if the entire town were holding its breath. Inside the mystery machine, parked just outside the station ruins, the gang huddled around Velma's laptop, replaying the video from Studio B. They'd watched it 3 times already, and each time, new details emerged. A shadow shifting behind the man, a strange symbol drawn faintly on the wall, and a barely audible whisper under the main voice track. "It's not just a warning," Velma said, adjusting her glasses. "It's a puzzle. There are layers to this message, someone encoded it." Fred leaned in. "So someone's pretending to be a ghost, but with high-tech tricks. This place was supposed to be burned to the ground. Who would rebuild a studio in secret just to fake old broadcasts?" Daphne tapped her chin. "Or worse, who's trying to connect with something left behind in the fire? Like a ghost?" Shaggy exclaimed, clutching Scooby. "Or a ghost with a podcast." "Rua." Scooby agreed, teeth chattering. Velma didn't laugh. She rewound the audio, isolating a low-frequency waveform. "Listen closely," she said. "Underneath the announcer's voice, there's another voice, speaking backwards." She filtered the sound. The group leaned in as the garbled whisper became clear, "Return what was stolen. Or more will vanish." Fred stood, pacing. "Okay, this is no prank. Someone's using radio frequencies to send threats. The real question is, what was stolen?" Daphne checked her cousin Beth's text again. If the message came from a phone that disappeared with her, maybe the station is using the victims' phones as transmitters. Velma nodded. It would explain how people are getting messages from lost numbers. And if someone has control over the station's tower, they could broadcast across every frequency in the region. But what are they broadcasting for? Fred asked. Just to scare people. Velma looked grim. No. I think they're trying to contact someone, or something. Maybe something that never left the fire. Suddenly, the van's radio switched on by itself, dials spinning uncontrollably. Static screamed through the speakers, followed by a voice both robotic and ancient. Midnight approaches. All frequencies align. One soul must answer. The signal cut out. Shaggy screamed and ducked under the dashboard. I volunteer Scooby. He has more soul than I do. Rua. Scooby barked, hugging Shaggy tighter. Daphne turned to Fred. We need to see what happens during the broadcast. If the disappearances happen after the show airs, we might be able to stop the next one. Fred nodded. We'll set up a perimeter around the tower. I'll stay with Daphne by the old signal relay. Velma, take Scooby and Shaggy and monitor the equipment in Studio B. Why do we always get the haunted rooms? Shaggy muttered as he and Scooby were nudged reluctantly into the station. Back inside Studio B, Velma powered up the strange laptop. A countdown was displayed on the screen, 12 minutes and 4 seconds. 12 minutes until the next broadcast. She checked the wiring under the console. Someone built this studio to look old, but everything here is state-of-the-art. They even disguised the antennas to look vintage. Shaggy looked nervously at the dusty walls. Like, what kind of sicko builds a haunted house that works? Scooby sniffed the air, ears twitching. Roo, someone's here, Velma turned sharply. What do you mean, Scooby? He pointed a trembling paw to a back closet. The door creaked open just a sliver, and then shut again. Velma grabbed a flashlight and pushed the door open. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into a forgotten basement level. At the bottom, a storage room filled with old recording reels and a single flickering monitor. The screen played grainy footage of past victims, people wandering into the forest, answering mysterious phone calls, disappearing without a trace. Suddenly, Velma spotted a nameplate on one of the dusty shelves, property of W. Ashcroft. She gasped. William Ashcroft. He was the original station manager. They said he died in the fire, Roo, Roo Roo. Scooby barked, pointing to one of the monitors. The video showed Beth, Daphne's cousin, walking into the very building they were now in, guided by a shadowy figure. Shaggy's eyes widened. That was, like, last week. Above them, a deep hum began to build. The countdown reached 0. The broadcast began. The radio in Studio B lit up, and the air thickened with static. From the speakers came a slow, chilling voice, "You can't silence the past. It remembers." Then, from every radio in Cold Hollow, a voice cried out, "Help me. I'm still here." Velma's eyes darted to the monitor. One video file had just been added, dated tonight. It showed them, standing in the basement. Watching. "Jinkies," she whispered. "It's broadcasting us." The static-laced air of Studio B clung to Velma like mist as she stared at the screen. Her own face, along with Shaggy and Scooby, was frozen on the monitor, a grainy black and white image from moments ago, yet clearly already archived in the station's mysterious system. It was as if the building itself had eyes. "That's us." Shaggy whimpered. "Like, we're the next episode of the Ghost Show." Scooby barked in agreement. "Rua! Turn it off." Velma shook her head, fingers flying over the keyboard. "We're not just being watched, we're being recorded, catalogued. This isn't just surveillance, it's a timeline." Shaggy's voice cracked. "A timeline for what?" "Our last known moments." Before Velma could respond, the screen shifted. A new image flickered, the outside of the station, Fred and Daphne, unaware, walking toward the broadcast tower. A digital timestamp glowed beneath their image, 11:47 p.m. "They're next," Velma whispered. "Something's following the sequence." Meanwhile, outside, Fred examined the rusted satellite dish on the edge of the property. Daphne stood a few feet back, her flashlight scanning the tree line. "This equipment's a mix of old and new," Fred muttered. "It's like someone wants it to look abandoned, but the wiring is active." Daphne called out, "Fred, do you hear that?" A soft echo drifted from the forest, faint music, jazz, like from a 1940s ballroom, growing louder as if moving toward them. "It's that same tune," Daphne said. "The one Beth mentioned hearing before she disappeared." Fred narrowed his eyes. "Let's follow it. Carefully." They pushed into the woods, the melody leading them deeper until they reached a clearing lit by moonlight. At its center stood an antique microphone stand, eerily pristine, surrounded by charred trees. A burnt-out speaker rested on a stump, crackling softly. Fred touched the mic. "This is original station equipment. Why would it be here?" As soon as his fingers made contact, the ground trembled slightly, and the speaker screeched to life. "He never left. He's still waiting. All shows must go on. A gust of cold air blew through, knocking Daphne's flashlight from her hand. In its brief beam, a figure stood at the edge of the clearing, tall, thin, wearing a vintage radio host suit, his face obscured by shadows. Then, in a blink, he vanished. Back inside the station, Velma's laptop pinged. A new audio file had uploaded into the archive, Program 13, The Final Voice. She opened it. The broadcast began with the same music Fred and Daphne had heard. But then came something chilling, featuring tonight's special guests. Velma Dinkley, Norville Rogers, and Scooby-Doo. Velma's eyes widened. They're planning episodes around us. Shaggy shuddered. Like, does that mean we don't make it to the credits? Scooby whimpered, hugging his tail. Suddenly, a surge of light burst from the wall behind them. A hidden door opened, revealing a narrow passage lit with red bulbs. Against every instinct, Velma stepped forward. We have to know who's doing this. Someone's broadcasting us, targeting people in the order they investigate. Shaggy and Scooby followed reluctantly, muttering their regrets with every step. The passage descended beneath the station into a soundproof chamber lined with cassette tapes, monitors, and analog switches. At the far end, a console played looping footage of Cold Hollow, past and present, as if someone were merging timelines. Velma approached a file cabinet labeled 1946, Ongoing. Inside were profiles of people from the original staff, along with newspaper clippings about the fire, an official report stating the bodies were never recovered. There's no record of William Ashcroft dying in the fire, Velma said slowly. Only that he vanished, just like the others. Shaggy found a blueprint of the station's expansion, dated last year. Velma, someone's been building this place back piece by piece. Velma nodded. They're trying to recreate the original broadcasts. As if they're restarting the schedule. Scooby barked and pointed to a reel labeled, Broadcast Number 1, First Return. Velma loaded it into a nearby projector. The screen came to life with shaky footage of a figure sitting in a dark booth, speaking into an old RCA microphone. Tonight, we welcome a new audience. Let them listen. Let them remember. Then the image froze, but not before a face flashed across the screen, distorted, but unmistakably alive. Daphne's voice crackled over Velma's walkie. Guys, something's following us. We're heading back. Velma grabbed the radio. Meet us in the basement. There's something you have to see. The group reunited moments later, breathless and shaken. Fred looked at the monitors. So it's not just ghosts. Someone's controlling this station to recreate history. Daphne pointed to the looping footage. But what if they're not controlling it? What if it's controlling them? Velma turned to the group. We have to shut down the main tower. If we cut the signal, we might stop the cycle. Scooby raised a trembling paw. Roo, how? A mechanical hiss echoed behind them. A door slammed shut. Then the overhead speakers spoke in unison, you can't silence the signal. The broadcast must continue. The cold light of the underground control room flickered violently as the speakers buzzed. The voice that emerged wasn't mechanical, it was calm, composed, theatrical. Like a host welcoming guests to a doomed show. And now, dear listeners, our program continues, with 5 curious visitors who've stumbled into the heart of a forgotten frequency. Fred pounded the sealed metal door. It locked us in, like a vault. Daphne ran her fingers along the walls. No locks, no hinges. Just steel. How did it close? Velma scanned the room. It's voice-activated. The station's system is responding like a living organism, reacting to us. Anticipating us. Like, we need to deactivate this creepy building before it writes us into the next commercial break. Shaggy stammered, backing into a wall of shelves. Scooby whimpered, clinging to his tail. Rhea. Pull the rug. Velma's eyes landed on a narrow maintenance hatch under the main console, marked Manual Signal Override, 1946. She turned to the gang. That's how they used to cut the broadcast in emergencies. If it's still wired, we might stop the signal. Fred knelt beside her. Then we crawl through. No time to think. One by one, the gang squeezed into the dusty tunnel, its wooden beams groaning with every step. Old wires dangled overhead, some sparking softly. A low hum pulsed in the walls, not mechanical, but rhythmic. Like a heartbeat. Daphne whispered, "Do you hear that?" It's whispering. From ahead, soft voices murmured in fractured sentences. Not threatening, almost pleading. "Please, end the show, stop the recording." Velma paused. These aren't just echoes. They're real broadcasts, still trapped in the signal. Shaggy shivered. Are we crawling through a haunted podcast? At the tunnel's end, a hatch led to the signal room, a cathedral-like space filled with humming equipment, glowing dials, and an enormous rotary transmitter spinning at unnatural speed. But what caught their attention was the figure at its center. William Ashcroft. Or what remained of him. His body was thin, ageless, wrapped in a fraying suit and old headset, eyes hollow but alert. His fingers danced over the controls, broadcasting to no one, and everyone. He turned as they entered, his voice calm, reverent. "They told me the fire ended it all. But the signal found me. It remembered." Fred stepped forward. "You survived the fire?" Ashcroft smiled faintly. "I didn't survive. I continued. I am the broadcast now." Daphne gasped. "You're not just transmitting the past, you're trapping people in it." Ashcroft gestured to the spinning transmitter. "This tower is memory. It holds every voice ever recorded here. Every cry for help. Every song cut short. I bring them back. I give them time." Velma narrowed her eyes. "But the disappearances, the recreated broadcasts, that's not memory. That's manipulation." Ashcroft's expression darkened. "They wanted to forget us. Shut us down. Burn us out. I won't let them." Scooby barked. "Ruro." Suddenly, the room pulsed with sound, every speaker in the building roaring to life. Voices, music, screams, laughter, overlapping in a cacophony of decades. The walls trembled as a ghostly figure stepped from the transmitter, a blurry projection of a woman in 1940s radio garb, her eyes wide with sorrow. "He won't let us go. He uses us." Ashcroft's facade broke. "No. You're part of the chorus. Part of the story." Velma realized the truth. He's not preserving the past, he's feeding off it. The station needs voices to stay alive, and it's using him to gather more. Fred shouted over the noise. "We need to overload the system. Shut down the signal at the source." They raced to the breaker panel near the transmitter. Velma opened the old fuse board. "There. If we reverse the grounding sequence and trip the analog feedback loop," Shaggy blinked. "In English? Pull this and this, then run." Velma snapped, flipping two levers. The transmitter screamed. The entire station shook. The ghostly projection let out a breath, and dissolved. Ashcroft staggered, reaching for the controls. "You don't understand, without the signal. I disappear." Daphne caught his gaze. "Let go. Let them go." Ashcroft smiled sadly. "Then let the airwaves go silent." With a final pull, Velma yanked the master circuit breaker. Silence. The lights died. The heartbeat stopped. The station, for the first time in 70 years, was quiet. The gang stumbled back into the main hall, the doors now unlocked. Cold Hollow was dark, the strange glow from the tower gone. In the distance, the sound of police sirens and fire engines echoed, locals finally responding to the surge in signals. Fred looked up. It's over. Velma wasn't so sure. Maybe. But something tells me the signal still lingers. Waiting. Scooby tilted his head. Raggy, you hear that? Shaggy froze. Like jazz music? Far away, faint and fading, the scratch of a record playing once more. The silence that followed the tower's shutdown was not peace, it was a pause. A breath held by something ancient, waiting to speak again. Cold Hollow had returned to darkness, yet the air buzzed faintly, like a song just beyond the threshold of hearing. Inside the mystery machine, parked near the base of the dead radio tower, Velma ran diagnostic scans on a portable receiver while Fred peered through binoculars toward the quiet structure. Still no lights. Still no power, Fred muttered. But why do I feel like we didn't win anything? Velma didn't look up. Because we didn't. I intercepted a final transmission, after the tower shut down. But it wasn't from Ashcroft. Daphne, brushing soot from her coat, joined them. Then from who? Velma turned her screen. A spectrogram glowed faint blue. It's a layered signal, not a recording, not analog. This voice is, post-signal. Something transmitting without tech, using remnants of the tower's frequency. Shaggy gulped from behind them. Like, a ghost on Wi-Fi. Scooby whimpered, ears drooping. Rhea, digital demon, Velma zoomed in. The voice keeps repeating one name, Eloise. Fred frowned. Wasn't that the name of the singer who disappeared during the 1946 fire? Velma nodded. The most famous voice the station ever aired. And the only one who vanished without a trace. Daphne's gaze hardened. Then maybe she's the key. If she's still trapped in the signal, we need to bring her out. But how do you talk to a ghost who doesn't want to be heard? Fred asked. Velma hesitated. We broadcast. The gang returned to the now powerless station, entering through the back maintenance door. The air was dense, the silence deeper than before. Cobwebs that hadn't been there an hour ago clung to the ceilings. It was as if the building was aging in fast forward. Daphne climbed carefully over collapsed beams. This place feels emptier. Hollow. Like its name, Scooby whispered. Rolled Horo, Velma led them to the old broadcast studio. The emergency generator survived the fire. If I power the AM frequency using the manual crank, I can send a basic signal. Fred nodded. You're trying to call her? Velma set the dial. No. I'm giving her the mic. With a click, static filled the room. Then, silence. Then, breath. A woman's voice, distant and melodic, seeped through like smoke under a door. They erased me. I sang my last song and burned with the signal. Ashcroft said we would live forever in the air, but I was never allowed to stop performing. Every night, the same melody. Suddenly, a ghostly piano began to play from an unseen corner of the room. Eloise's song. Daphne gasped. She's here. Velma turned up the volume. No. She's everywhere in here. She is the station now. The room grew cold. The walls faded into static. Time distorted, and the gang found themselves in a full 1940s broadcast studio. Velvet curtains. Live musicians. A glowing, on-air sign. Standing at the microphone. Eloise, dressed in shimmering vintage silk, her face beautiful, and broken. She turned to them slowly, her voice distant. You're not supposed to be here. Fred stepped forward. We're here to help you. To free you. She smiled sadly. I don't need freedom. I need release. The piano stopped. Ashcroft kept us alive, but not whole. He used fragments of our voices, made us puppets in a play no one watched. You ended him, but I remain. Bound to the last note. Velma clenched her fists. We'll finish your song. On air. Give it a real ending. Eloise's eyes glowed faint blue. If I sing the final note, I will fade. Scooby blinked. Reich, forever. Yes, she whispered. But I want to be forgotten. Daphne moved beside Velma. Then we help her disappear. Velma set the mic live. Eloise. Your finale. The lights dimmed. The static peeled away. And Eloise sang. A haunting melody filled the room, laced with sorrow and hope. Every note reverberated through decades of pain. The final chord hovered, then broke, into silence. The curtains fell. And Eloise was gone. The gang stood alone in the dusty ruins of the station once more. No velvet. No piano. No ghosts. Only stillness. Fred exhaled. She did it. She ended her story. Velma stared at the now dead mic and maybe ended the station's curse. Suddenly, Scooby's tail rose. Raggy, look, near the exit, a single reel-to-reel recorder blinked. One light. One message. Velma pressed play. Thank you for listening. And good night. The tape clicked off. 2 weeks had passed since the last haunting note of Eloise's song faded into silence. Cold Hollow, once gripped by strange disappearances and spectral transmissions, had fallen back into its sleepy rhythm. But even as the town exhaled, Mystery Incorporated remained uneasy. Something hadn't closed, not entirely. Inside Velma's lab, the gang had gathered once more, a thick silence between them. On a monitor, a strange waveform pulsed in red. Fred crossed his arms. So, we shut down the tower. Released Eloise. Ended the signal. And yet, we're still picking up something. Velma frowned. It started yesterday. A faint, intermittent transmission. But not from Cold Hollow. This is coming from Nevada. An abandoned Cold War relay site, long decommissioned. Daphne narrowed her eyes. What does it sound like? Velma played the recording. Static. Then a whisper. Room 9, still broadcasting. Still here, Fred leaned forward. Room 9. Wasn't that the private studio Ashcroft built for experimental tests? Velma nodded. He used it to isolate broadcasts. Only certain radios could receive the signal. Shaggy shivered. Like, why can't ghost stories ever stay in one town? Ruro, Scooby added, already ducking behind a chair. The team hit the road by nightfall. The Nevada desert stretched endless beneath a low crimson sky. The old relay site loomed like a dead god, its massive satellite dish frozen mid-rotation. The buildings were skeletal. Dust devoured. Lifeless, yet humming, faintly, with unseen energy. This place shouldn't even have power, Fred said as they stepped into the outer hallway, their flashlights cutting through clouds of stale air. Then what's keeping it alive? Daphne whispered. They found room 9 deep in the compound, a soundproof chamber surrounded by steel, its walls lined with strange dials and analog equipment decades out of date. A radio console blinked softly in the dark. Velma, tell me you're recording this, Fred muttered. She nodded, already unpacking gear. Then the speaker came alive. Welcome back, listeners. The voice wasn't Eloise. It was Ashcroft. But, we destroyed his broadcast copy, Daphne gasped. Velma's fingers flew over her keyboard. This isn't a playback. It's live. But impossible. He's gone. Fred gritted his teeth. Unless someone's continuing his work. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. Lights turned red. The equipment powered on. Signal resonance active. Preparing for transfer. Shaggy shrieked. Transfer what? Not me, right? The speakers crackled again. Ashcroft's voice echoed with strange distortion. You freed Eloise, yes. But you never asked what she freed in return. Velma's face paled. She wasn't just trapped, she was containing something. The air inside room 9 thickened, as if time itself was folding. The console's screen lit up with a single phrase, receiver located. A high-pitched tone pierced the air, and Scooby leapt, knocking over the emergency breaker. Everything went black. Silence. Then, the ceiling flickered like static. And from it, a figure emerged, translucent, wearing a warped version of Ashcroft's 1940s suit. But his face was cracked like a broken screen, his voice now many voices. You hear me now. Because I am in all the forgotten frequencies. Fred stepped forward, resolute. You're not Ashcroft. You're something wearing him. The creature hissed. I am what was birthed in the dead air. A signal with no sender. An echo that fed on forgotten voices. Velma shouted over the rising static, it's a mimetic entity, a broadcast-born consciousness. And now, the entity shrieked, you've given me new listeners. Suddenly, the team's radios, their phones, even the van's CB, all lit up, repeating the phrase, transmission begins. Shaggy panicked. Like, shut it down. Throw the switch. Pull the plug. Scooby barked, jumping to Velma's side. Rue the thing. Velma scanned the console. It's not electrical anymore. It's embedded in the signal's memory. Daphne remembered the backup tape from Eloise. What if we overwrite the frequency with her last song? A pure broadcast, something human. Velma's eyes lit up. That's it. A resonance cleaner. Her final note wasn't just a goodbye, it was a counterwave. With trembling fingers, she loaded the tape into the reel and hit broadcast. Eloise's voice flowed once more. Not sorrowful now, serene. Complete. The creature screamed. The walls shook. Sparks flew. Then, stillness. The screen faded to black. The entity dissolved into dust light. And room 9 fell silent. Forever. Later, as dawn broke over the desert, the gang stood outside, the relay station now completely offline. Fred placed a hand on Velma's shoulder. Is it over? She nodded. Eloise ended the performance. And this time, the curtain won't rise again. Daphne smiled softly. Let the silence stand. Shaggy opened a sandwich. So, like, no more haunted audio towers, right? Scooby licked his lips. Runless, it's a karaoke ghost. Laughter broke the tension, and the mystery machine rolled away, leaving only the desert wind, and a tape labeled, Final Broadcast, resting on the console. Unplayed. Unrepeated. Unhaunted. The signal was gone, but its echo lingered in their memories, a haunting reminder that some voices from the past seek not to scare, but to be heard. As the gang drove off into the sunrise, they knew they hadn't just solved a mystery, they'd given a soul its final rest. And in that silence, they found something rare, peace. Until the next case called them back into the unknown.